Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori. Today we are going to talk about the awesome reading month that I had in January. Now, it was a big deal for me to relax my reading a little bit this year. I read 100 books in 2023 and 100 books in 2024, and that was just too much. And I had kind of tried to relax my reading a little bit last year, but this year I really wanted to slow down a little bit and really savor the books that I was choosing and really focus on picking books that I was most excited to read, because the other goal that I had was to raise my average rating for 2025, because last year it was a 3.71, which isn't terrible, and like it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, but it was just a personal goal where I wanted to read books that I was more invested in and thought that I was gonna more likely give 4 or 5 stars. I had some absolute banger books this month, you guys, but I had a couple that didn't work quite as well for me, which is fine. So I'm here to talk about everything that I read in January, so let's get started. The first book that I finished in the month of January was Arm of the Sphinx by Josiah Bancroft. This is book 2 in the Books of Babel series, which my husband binged through and absolutely loved last year. So I promised him that I was going to read all 4 of the books in this series so that we can talk about them, because I'm really invested in being able to have read a series that he loved so much last year. So I am officially halfway through the series now, and I am very happy to report that I enjoyed book 2 so much more than book 1. Book 1 wasn't a bad book. It was really good. Josiah Bancroft has an incredibly unique prose style, very inventive world building. It is just really different than a lot of the fantasy that we typically read, and I love that about it. I think he plays with the idea of steampunk, but in his own very unique way, and I love all of that. The characters also are very vibrant. They're very interesting and unique. And in the first book, what I struggled with a little bit is I didn't feel enough of an attachment to those characters. I wanted to invest a little bit more than I ended up feeling like I did. And in book 2, I was given what I was waiting for. There's so much more really interesting character interaction in this book, and it's, for a good chunk of the book, didn't feel like it was about the world building as much as it did in book 1. It did kind of lean more that direction once we got over halfway through the book, which it's fine. But I really had a good time with this book. I love the exploration of the characters that kind of deepens through book 2, and we get some really cool airship kind of piratey vibes out of the beginning of the book, which was great fun. So yeah, I'm really excited about finishing this series, and the opinions of the people around me, my husband included, on how I'm gonna feel about the 3rd and 4th book in the series are very interesting. So everybody pretty much guarantees that I will love book 3. Book 4 seems to be the one that everyone's very polarized on, so we will see how I feel about it, but I'm very excited to read book 3. I think the setup in book 2 going into the next book is going to be really interesting. And you guys, the fact that I read 3 book 2s in January, I'm so excited about that, because one of the things I epically failed at last year was continuing or finishing series. I finished a grand total of 1 series in 2024, and that's just abysmal, you guys. Like, oh my goodness. Anyways, so in 2025, one of my goals is to focus on continuing and finishing some of the series that I've started in the last couple of years, because when I listed them all out, I gave up around 35 series. Some of those I've DNF'd, but a lot of them I just haven't continued, and that's just too many. It's too many. So book 2, number 1 of January, was Arm of the Sphinx, and I'm trying to remember what I gave this officially. I gave this a 4 star. I really did have a good time with it. I think it leans a little bit more towards the 3.5 than 4 star if we care about star ratings. But I really did enjoy this, and I liked a lot of the exploration of the characters that we got here in book 2. So that was my first read. The second thing that I read is Island of the Sea Women by Lisa C. I have talked about Lisa C on my channel multiple times before. The thing that I love so much about Lisa C is that this woman is so incredibly talented at creating a really nuanced and deep and engaging female-female relationship, whether that's mother-daughter, sister-sister, best friends, whatever it is, and then setting it in a time period of Asian history that is just incredibly dynamic and creates this landscape where these characters have to work through some really, really difficult things. And the spectrum that she's able to cover from joy to absolute despair is mind-blowing to me. She is so incredibly talented at what she does. And Island of the Sea Women is my fourth read by Lisa See, and I think it's my second favorite. I still love The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. I've talked about that on my channel before. I love that book so much. That one's still my favorite. But this one, you guys, it takes place around the time of slightly before, during, and after the Second World War, and the relationship at the center of this story is two young best friends who are raised on Jeju Island, Korea, and they're part of this collective of female divers, which is a very rich and long-held tradition in their area of these women who are providing for their families. They're providing not just food, but they're also providing extra money for their children or family members' educations, and it's a dangerous job, and there's nothing else like it in the world, but there's such a camaraderie there and a rich history of these women who have learned how to harvest from the sea and really become part of that side of nature. It's really incredible, and that's kind of the central focal point of the story through the atrocities that happened to the people of Jeju Island before, during, and after the Second World War. And it is just... this book will confront you in so many different ways, and I had so many very visceral reactions to the things that these characters went through in the book. Every time I read a book by Lisa See, it's important, and the stories she tells are so important and rich and beautiful, and I cannot recommend her highly enough. Do go into her books recognizing that there are a lot of content warnings. It is very heavy. There's a lot of very, very heavy things in her books, and she writes them in a way that doesn't glorify them. She doesn't sensationalize them in any way, but she's also unapologetic about putting on page exactly what these people would have gone through at this time. And it's hard to read. It's very hard to read. There were a couple of times where I had to put the book down, but I read this for book club with my husband and my two friends from college, and we had an amazing discussion about it. And yet again, Lisa See proves why she is at the very top of my list when it comes to historical fiction. All right, the next book that I read was Hawk Song by Amelia Atwater Rhodes. This is a YA shapeshifter romance, and this was a book that was recommended to me by a friend of mine. It was one of her childhood favorite books, and how to talk about this book? I really enjoyed the world building of this. I actually find shapeshifters a very interesting fantasy concept, and I really enjoyed the idea of getting kind of another look into a way that could be utilized in storytelling. Because it was a romance, and again, I know it always seems like I hate all romance. I promise I don't. But this one I can see is one that I would have had a completely different viewpoint on had I read it as a teenager, and I completely understand where, you know, it was kind of at the beginning of the whole Twilight paranormal craze that this came out, and I can definitely see this being kind of one of the early pushes into that genre. I had a really hard time with especially the male love interest in this book. I was very frustrated by him, and I did feel like the book kind of glorified really toxic behavior way too much. There were glimmers, and there's a big difference between having a character that is deeply flawed, that is struggling to understand why their behavior is wrong. That's fine. And I read a ton of books where I like books that have heavily flawed characters. And I know that I'm probably reading too deeply into this book, but for me, when it comes to young adult fiction, I'm looking for things that either call out behavior or give younger readers something to aspire to or learn from. And I do think there are aspects of that in Hawksong. But what was really tough for me is that I felt like the toxic behavior was romanticized a little bit too much in this book for me personally. I did think that there were some really cool potential moments with the lore and the different cultures that were utilized in the story, but ultimately this one fell really flat for me, and I don't think it's because it's YA. I do read a lot of YA that I really enjoy, and even middle grade that I've really enjoyed. I gave a couple of 5 stars to some middle grade books last year or the year before and the year before. So it's not the age level of the book at all, and I actually think writing-wise, one of the things that I really am impressed by is the fact that Amelia Atwater Rhodes wrote this book at age 19, I think, and so she's a young author, and her writing style for her age was actually really impressive. I'm not gonna lie, I was very impressed by her story structure and writing style, and I think that's really where she shone in this book, and I think her age showed a little bit more in the characters and the way that certain behaviors were romanticized in the story. I did also appreciate that this was a YA, like not paranormal, shapeshifter romance, where it didn't move into a heavily sexualized area. There were some innuendos and some moments of that, but it never crossed a line. And that also I very much appreciated. This is the first book in a series of 5 novels, I believe. So it would be interesting to kind of see how she handles some of the characters going forward into the rest of the series. I don't know that it's a series I personally will be continuing, but we had a great discussion. My friend and I had a great discussion about it afterwards, and at the end of the day, that's really what I'm looking for when I read books with other people, is having a really good and deep discussion about the themes and the characters. So in that, it was definitely a success. I'm gonna skip the next book I read because it is my book of the month, so let's go straight into the last book of January, which was Son of a Lich by J. Zachary Pike. This is another book too, you guys. I'm so proud of myself for continuing 3 different series this month. Son of a Lich is the second book after Orconomics, which is the Dark Prophets saga. It's a trilogy of books. Orconomics actually won the self-published fantasy blog off competition in 2018, I believe, and I completely understood why. When I read that in December, it's got such a unique, very heavily Dungeons and Dragons inspired storyline world characters, but it also plays with the idea of what the economic and societal norms would be if, like, dungeons and hero parties were just part of society, and what organizations would be built around that and how would that affect society. So he really kind of takes a twist on the generic D&D style story, and the characters in book 1 really had me invested. It did take a little bit of getting used to in the beginning of the book, but I really enjoyed the characters. Moving into book 2, I did not enjoy book 2 as much as I enjoyed book 1. I felt like the plot was definitely not as tightly woven as it was in Orconomics. And he had made a couple of character choices at the end of Orconomics that I felt like actually kind of hurt the story in book 2, and maybe I mean, and this is my writer talking, I would have done something slightly different with how the ending of Orconomics happened, because I actually think that it took away from the characters in book 2. But we're still with our merry band of heroes in book 2, and of course the stakes have gone up a level. We're also seeing a little bit of a breakdown of the economic structure that we were introduced to in book 1, which I also found really interesting. It's a very nerdy book, you guys. Like, this is such a nerdy trilogy, which I love. We're here for that in our fantasy genre. The characterization was really good and interesting again in book 2. I did again feel like it was a little bit less engaging than I felt in book 1, but I am going to finish the trilogy. I have one more book after this, Dragonfired. There were some good moments in Son of a Lich. I do feel like some of the conflicts between certain characters has been drug out a little bit more than I think it needs to be. And so I was kind of pulling back from that a little bit in book 2 because I was like, okay, like, can we have some kind of resolution or move on to different, you know, interpersonal conflicts, whatever. But overall, I think I gave it 3 stars. I had a decent time with it. It was a fun read. I did feel like it was a little long. So by the time it was done, like, I was ready. I was ready for it to be moving on to the next book. But I continued another series, and I really appreciate Pike's unique take on a D&D style story. All right, guys, now we are going to get to my book of the month, which I'm going to try really hard not to gush about too much, but let's be honest, I'm probably just going to gush about it. That is A Haunt for Jackals by J.L. Odom. This is book 2 in her Land of Exile series, and book 1 by Blood by Salt was my number 2 book of the year in 2024. I absolutely loved it so much. This book, I was a little apprehensive going into it, as we always are when we absolutely love the beginning of a series and we never know, is the author going to be able to keep my level of engagement, immersion, and love for the rest of the series. And I'm very happy to say that A Haunt for Jackals definitely leveled things up in every way that I was hoping it would. The character development in this series is some of the best I have read in a long time. And Odom really tackles a lot of somewhat confrontational themes. She goes really deep into different religions within her cultures and the idea of faith, and either the, you know, being devout in faith or having a lack of faith or struggling with faith. And I really appreciate when authors are willing to delve into the topic of faith and religion in a way that feels more nuanced, and like they're not trying to, you know, lead the reader immediately into a specific mindset about it. There's a character in this series, you guys, that has rocketed to the top of my favorite fantasy characters lists. And she's probably in my top 3 to 5 characters, probably top 3, if I'm being totally honest, 3 to 5 characters in all of fantasy. I think we meet her kind of towards the end of book 1, and just the expansion of these characters in book 2, I just love. There were so many moments where I had my heart in my throat. This is a epic, slow burn military fantasy that is very heavily character driven. The plot in book 2 was a little bit less linear and tight. I feel like that we did jump around quite a bit more in book 2, and I think if this had been the first book and that had been more the style of the plotline, it would have been a lot harder for me to stay immersed in the story. It helped that I already knew the characters and was really invested in all of them, so the jumps didn't jar me as much, but that would be like probably my one critique of the story upon a fresh read, is just that the plot line was definitely jumping a little bit more and felt a little bit more jarring than it did in book 1. But you guys, this is on track to become one of my all-time favorite series if Odom pulls off the 3rd book and the ending, which I completely trust that she will do. This is an amazing book. This is my first 5-star of 2025, and I could not be happier. I love it so much. This is the advanced reader copy that I received very graciously from the author. But it is coming out on February 25th, 2025. And so this is the time to pick up this series if you haven't yet and you want to try it before book 2 comes out. This is perfect timing. And I know that she's deep into working on book 3. I'm so excited, you guys. I love this series so much. This is the kind of book that I wait for as I'm reading and I'm enjoying all of these books. There's always a book every once in a while that comes along that really just speaks to you as a reader, and it feels like it was written for you on so many different levels. And this is one of those books, and she handles so many different slow burn character developmental elements in this series so well. I can't say enough good things about it, to be honest. There are minor quips that I've had with it, but overall, this is, like I said, this is definitely going to end up on my favorite series list. those are all the books that I read in January, and beyond reading, I do have a couple of things to share with you guys that I'm very excited about. One of the reasons why I pulled back, especially in January, on my reads was because I was writing a lot more. And I'm very happy to announce that my current work in progress novel, which is called Cold Silver for Souls, the official first draft is done. And I am going through edits to send it to my alpha team now, which I'm very excited about. So in the next couple of months, I should have some release date information, a cover reveal, and I'm so excited, you guys. I'm so excited to share this book with you. It has been a labor of love for the last year, and really, I learned so much more about myself as a writer during this process, and it was a very personal and very healing writing journey to go on, just because of everything that has been going on the last couple of years, and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. Cold Silver for Souls was actually originally a short story that I wrote a couple years ago, end of 2023, I think. Middle of 2023, for a anthology that I was in called The Advent of Winter, which includes 24 different stories by different indie fantasy authors. I knew as soon as I finished the story and the anthology came out that this was a character that I was definitely going to stay with, that I wanted to expand her story, that I wanted to build out more. So the main character of this book is a necromancer bounty hunter in a world inspired by the Yukon Gold Rush and the Wild West. So I'm very excited about it. It's very different than the other two books that I've written, and it was a really good reset for me last year and kept my creativity burning, and I cannot wait to share with you guys more information on it. So keep an eye out on my social media, and of course I will introduce her as well here, and all of the information for cover reveal and everything like that will be on the channel as well. So thank you guys for your patience. I know a lot of people have been asking me when my next book is coming out, and I know that a lot of people have been asking for the sequels of both Phased and the Bloodstones. Those are in the works. I will be turning my focus completely now to book 2 in the Legends of the Bruhai series, and I cannot wait to get back to it, you guys. But Cold Silver was a much needed reset for me after the last couple of years, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So more on that to come, but that was a really big, exciting announcement that I wanted to make here at the end of the video, because I'm very excited. I'm very excited to have another book coming out soon. That's about it. That's my reading update. I hope you guys have been having a wonderful first month of the year. Please let me know down in the comments what you read in January, how you felt about it, favorite book of the month, whatever you want to share. And I hope you're having a fantastic week. I hope you're reading some 5-star reads, and I'll see you in the next video.